Senator Enzi moved Washington to Wyoming on July 23rd when he hosted a field hearing to discuss how to change the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, also known as No Child Left Behind. Enzi chose a Wyoming panel of education experts to get a better perspective on high school reform in rural areas. The testimony from the hearing will be relayed back to his colleagues on the Senate Education Committee as they move forward to fix the education law. Following are the highlights from the hearing.
As we look to the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, we need to strengthen programs that provide relevance, context, and rigor for students in both middle and high school. I believe it's time to bring attention to the secondary part of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The federal government needs to provide some resources to school districts for these efforts and ensure that the reforms used are data-driven and have a solid evidence base of success. We'll hear from our experts today that these efforts are difficult because there is no silver bullet when it comes to education reform. However, the federal government can help school districts by providing additional flexibility with the funds we provide to allow for the possible solution for each struggling school. In addition, it's important to emphasize the fact that a high school diploma does not guarantee that a student has learned the basics. I need to mention too that for all of our hearings, and I've been doing hearings now for 14 years, almost all of them in Washington, we have this requirement about providing testimony. This is the first panel that I can remember where we had all the testimony in advance. Shouldn't be a first after that many years, but it is, and it was a pleasure to read all of it.
The first initiative that I would like to address is that of a rigorous and well-defined high school curriculum. Compelling evidence exists that successful completion of a defined and a rigorous high school course of study enhances post-secondary and career readiness. Content knowledge provided by college readiness curricula and career readiness curricula are increasingly very similar. The Wyoming Pathway Scholarship, with its eligibility tied to the Success curriculum, provides Wyoming students and their families a strong incentive to complete an academically challenging high school curriculum.
I too appreciate the opportunity to be heard from. As you know, being in Wyoming, we're oftentimes considered to sort of be an intellectual wasteland, and I believe that we do actually have something to contribute. So it's indeed an honor to be able to contribute to that. I would like to simply couch my recommendation or my observations in a sort of redefinition of the 3 R's. Reading, writing, and arithmetic we all are familiar with. I think we need now as an educational system to look at relevance, remediation, and resources. Relevance, I believe, is, and as you have pointed out in your opening remarks, going to become more and more important as the merging of career and post-secondary education take place, so that preparation at the high school level is developed with goals that recognize that no student is going to be adequately prepared with merely a high school education.
We have initiated several strategies in the recent years to decrease our dropout rate. One of those is we have developed academies at each grade level, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. The academy concept briefly is that breaking our high school down into smaller groups with similar teachers teaching similar students, and then not only that, small groups of students meet regularly with one teacher, which is their advisor, talking about their academic progress and their needs and wants as a student. And also rescheduling, working 2 years on our high school schedule that allows those teachers to periodically have common planning time so that they can meet to talk about student data as it relates to student achievement.
I too am really interested in we call them the 4 R's. Not reading, arithmetic, that kind of thing. The 4 R's that we talk about in our career academies are rigor, relevance, relationships, and the last one is reflection. You got to think about what you learned. So we have right now 3 academies. Two of them are going to start in the fall. Our first one was an Energy Academy. And obviously, if you're going to do a career academy, you have to take what's happening in the community into, that's got to be your main focus. So we thought an Energy Academy would be great. Well, what happened was that it wasn't anchored in a CTE program. What we found with our career academies that they have to be anchored in CTE. So
CTE is?
Career Technical Education, sorry. And so our next academies are hospitality and tourism, which includes culinary arts, and transportation technology, and that includes the whole energy thing as well, because we have diesel and auto technology and all that sort of thing.
Everything we do in our school revolves around 4 critical questions, whether it's lesson planning, whether it's looking at essential outcomes. Everything we do starts with what do we want each student to learn? How will we know when each student has learned it? How will we respond when a student experiences difficulty? And how will we respond if a student already knows it? And that really has helped us develop some interventions and some strategies on better reaching our students and helping them succeed.
We're talking about changing the growth models now, and I'm sure that's going to happen, so we can tell how much a child advances that year, and instead of highly qualified teachers, we're going to be talking about highly effective teachers, which are the teachers that are able to move people along a little bit more than average.
Having the same discussion about the blame game, it goes downhill from junior college to high school to middle school to elementary school. And then we want to focus on parents below that. But those discussions have started happening where the 9th grade teachers visit with the 8th grade teachers saying this is what we need at our level so that we can move them to a level so that they're ready for college.
When we're talking about any of the kinds of assessments, we're also told that the schools want to have flexibility. I see a lot of head shaking here. What does flexibility mean to you?
The flexibility that we're looking for, in particular, are not all schools are failing. In fact, we think that there are very few that are failing. And some of the flexibility that we would encourage in the reauthorization is that if your school district has no failing schools and meets AYP every year, that we get the flexibility of using federal dollars the way we see fit at the local level.
In a career academy, the way you teach is way different than, it's not what you're teaching, it's the way you're teaching. And so I think that's where we'd like to see more flexibility, that we know that we have to meet the state standards. We know that we don't want any students not to be ready to receive the Hathaway Scholarship at whichever level they are aiming towards. But within a career academy, we need to have the flexibility that we can teach, say, out in the community, that we take the students out and they're doing something.
We can really agree on some standards that are not overly complicated or complex. I think flexibility can really be achieved with the simplest form of standards that we can develop and agree on, rather than trying to dictate the very minuscule and very detailed ways in which proficiency in those standards is accomplished. So, you know, I think flexibility in part can be developed through, as Kevin said earlier, some different approaches, but common outcomes, so that we understand that this isn't necessarily a prescriptive and very, very directed sort of approach, but that we really can agree on some fairly simple standards that everyone should be able to achieve, irrespective of whether you're talking about an urban school district with the learning challenges that students face there or here, where we have geography as a constant. I think flexibility really in part can be done more effectively through simplicity and through just simple agreement on some very basic principles.
Really, flexibility for me is acknowledging and devising educational practices that recognize students learn a lot differently. Each of us learns in a different way.
I would hope that in the reauthorization, the Department of Education looks at more of a support model for schools that are failing versus penalizing them. And support, I mean by not offering professional development for principals, teachers, curriculum directors in areas of school improvement. Bring in models of schools that have shown success versus penalizing. And the other is that it needs to be locally driven. And I'm not sure about the cost, but it doesn't do any good for them to tell me to click on their website from Washington, D.C. I don't get service from a website. Relationships are important, and we need to have a contact, not only from the State Department level, but from the federal level. When a school's in trouble, they need people help. They don't need a book to read, and they don't need a website to go to.
Appreciate all this information, and I will have some more questions that I'll get to you in writing, and some of the other senators may have once they've looked at the testimony and stuff that we may need cleared up. But I think that there's a great future for education, and I'm really impressed with the young people that I see in Washington that come from Wyoming. And when we see these groups from all over the United States and they're asking questions, I can pick the Wyoming kids out. They're just a little bit more independent and polite and thinking. And so you're doing a good job.
Thank you.
But we can do better. I remember when I was in junior high, the Russian shot up Sputnik, and we found out we were behind. And the students were embarrassed, the parents were embarrassed, the teachers were embarrassed, the country was embarrassed, and we kind of had a revolution in education. I don't want us to have that kind of a problem to get kids inspired in education. I want to thank the audience for joining us today and listening, and I hope that you have some ideas from this that you will also share with me. If you have any comments on this reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which at the current time is called No Child Left Behind, and we know it needs to be fixed, and we plan on doing that, and that's in a very bipartisan way. We've been having discussions, the people from the House and the Senate getting together, both Republicans and Democrats, and education is pretty bipartisan. So we've been pleased with the discussion so far. So I want to thank everybody for their participation and being here today, and this hearing's adjourned.